We are here. We're going to talk, even though there's not a ton of hockey news, we'll take some questions in the chat throughout the show, and we'll be able to see them in our new setup here. But we have some pre-show stuff. Russ, a lot of the NFL teams had their first preseason games. I know that Giants fans are going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs because Daniel Jones went 6 for 6. Yeah, that means he's ready for the Hall of Fame, right?
No, but I think the issue there is there was such a backlash when they drafted the guy.
Yeah.
Nobody had seen him play. I mean, let's be realistic about it. Nobody had seen him play. Where did he play? Duke or someplace?
Duke,
Yeah, I mean, they're not known for football, so nobody was watching him.
Dave Brown.
But the Giants did a good job of scouting here, and the guy at least has an NFL arm. So now people are so tired of Eli that they're making a bigger deal out of this guy than they probably should because they want Eli out of there. On the flip side, Sam Darnold looked really good. He looked good last year with no weapons around him. But now that you got a guy like Crowder there and eventually you'll have Bell in the backfield, right, you can see where he's smart. He makes fast decisions. He throws on the run. Like, this is the kind of quarterback the Jets have needed for a decade.
Jan, I'm glad you said Dave Brown, because I've heard a couple NFL writers who have been on the radio show that I go on in Buffalo, and they say Daniel Jones, the only first-round pick ever taken from Duke. And I'm like, Dave Brown, it was the supplemental draft, but they had to give up a first-round pick to pick him in the supplemental draft. So he was a first-round pick, and he was picked by the Giants, and he was picked from Duke. So
couple of things. So in my opinion on Jones, right, I think the issue wasn't so much that he was selected, it was where he was selected, right? Yeah. So if he had slid down where he was projected to go, nobody would have complained at all, but it's based upon where he went in the draft. And he did look good. I got to be honest with you. I mean, look, he threw into tight windows, especially the touchdown throw. It was a really nice throw. Mm-hmm. Darnold got lucky. He didn't get picked on the first pass that he had, and he joked around afterwards saying, great, he'll start off the Adam Gase era just like he started off his own era last year, getting a pick 6 on the first throw he made, right? So on the run, he's good. I mean, Russ knows I'm a big Jet fan. I used to be a season ticket holder. I'm a big Jet fan. I love seeing the weapons that they have. I love seeing what they have in this organization. Now, the offensive line is a concern still, even with the moves that they made in terms of even getting Khalil, who didn't play yesterday, and the defensive backfield, especially when you get past the first batch of them, is wolf ugly right now. So that's one of those areas of need. But again, you're going to see the clamoring for Jones as the season goes on. And Mike, I'm sure you've known this already. It's going to be like Kurt Warner and Eli, right? So even if they get off to a good start and the team doesn't think they're going to go anywhere, they're going to eventually make a swap and get Jones, which is what should have happened 2 years ago when the whole controversy started with Eli to begin with.
I'll tell you one thing I can tell you about Khalil is I know somebody that covers the Carolina Panthers, that covers every game, every practice, everything they do. Not only is he a great guy, he is a mistake-free player. And he just didn't go back to Carolina because he was just looking for a new challenge. Mm-hmm. And he thought he'd be retired, but the Jets coaxed him out of it. You know what? This is a good move by Douglas to get him out of retirement, and he is a good player. For people panning this move, they're gonna eat their word.
I'm not panning it at all. I like the move. I mean, his metrics last year weren't great if you go by Pro Football Focus, but I don't always go by everything. But again, the thing for me is he helped develop Cam Newton when he was there in terms of the system, and was a good mentor. Without McCown there, right, Darnold's kind of lost his safety blanket a little bit. So now with Khalil there, he has another veteran guy to lean on, especially as a center, which makes a huge difference in terms of blocking schemes, etc.
I'm not panning the move per se. I'm panning the fact that they had to make the move because their offensive line moves during the offseason were terrible. I mean, they had to go and get a 7th-round pick from Baltimore. Trade a 7th-round pick to Baltimore for a guy who apparently the Ravens were going to cut because their offensive line was so bad. So they should have addressed it because, you need to protect Darnold. The Bills did that with Josh Allen. They got multiple layers of offensive linemen, and a lot of them played pretty well yesterday. So, I mean, I think that's just a concern. Darnold is the most important guy in your team, and you need to protect him.
Right. And the reason they gave up the 7th-round pick, honestly, was to avoid him actually going out there and being able to be claimed by anybody. So Douglas wanted to be aggressive and bring him into the organization. He's not a particularly great player, but he does add depth to an area, as you mentioned, needed major remediation. But Douglas didn't come in until June, right? So he's made moves more so than I think, and Russ can attest this, than anyone even expected, based upon the time frame in which he took over the job, and most of the free agents were gone already.
Yeah.
I watched Geno Smith last night play the first half for Seattle, and he actually looked damn good.
I know.
Lynch was better, and he did. And I think that just shows you how bad the Mets were, the Jets were in all facets, right? Like, that's a team that needs a hard reset, and maybe they've started doing it.
I'm going to tell you what it's a function of. It's a function of them, Gino playing against a vanilla defense. Yeah. He can do that. He can't read defenses. That's his problem.
Yeah, Geno Smith is pyrite. He's fool's gold. He looks great at certain points, and then you shine the light on him, and you realize he's Geno Smith.
And keeping up the NFL talk, how about that English rugby player last night, Mike?
Yes.
How about my boy from England?
I was
bringing the old school game and running it back on the first carry.
And two things. That was great, and the way that the Bills players, this guy's apparently acted very professional. I think he realizes he's not going to make the team, but he's really in there in training camp, treating it as not like an HBO event, like a mini series or something. Yeah. He's going out there and he's trying to make the team. He's working hard, and they all like him. He's a good teammate, and he had a great run yesterday, and they all were very happy for him. But realistically, I don't think he's going to make it. But it's a good story, and it's nice. What I was struck by is the Bills gave a backup running back. I think his name is Sonaris Perry. They gave him number 32 to wear. And if you're not aware, 32 is O.J. Simpson's number, and O.J. is on the Bills Wall of Fame. He was never taken off, even after everything that happened.
And he's on Twitter.
He's on Twitter saying,
don't pay attention to what's on Twitter.
He's on Twitter still saying he's looking for the real killers at every municipal golf course in Southern California or Florida, wherever he is. But I was shocked, Russ. I could not believe that they gave his number out.
I know that. I didn't know that. That is kind of crazy. And Peter, I'm going to give you a story that you could get as far as from football. So when I was in Indianapolis one time for a convention, the Jets were playing the Colts, and this was the one game the Jets were going to give Ricky Ray a chance to play quarterback for them. And he was really good, and he threw 1 or 2 touchdowns, and I thought for sure he was going to be Chad Pennington's backup, and no, they didn't sign him. So you can never – a lot of times these guys will come in there and do really well, and it just doesn't mean anything. And it's a shame because it doesn't mean they're not good athletes. I saw a receiver last night. I can't remember who it was in the Eagles game playing he played for Calgary. Did he play for Calgary last year? The Stampeders, and he's a really good receiver. He might make it. He might be one of those guys.
Oh, I know who you mean. I just can't remember his name.
Is it Bennett and Marcus?
Blue Bombers beat Calgary last night.
Yeah,
only because a guy in his debut CFL game had 2 punt returns all the way to the house.
Wow.
Bombers haven't had an offensive TD in 6 quarters of football. It's awful.
Wow. The last thing I was going to say,
CFL for you, baby.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to say, because Jan talked about protecting. When Nate Sudfeld went down for the Eagles, he was like the security blanket for when Carson Wentz eventually gets hurt, because he's gotten hurt every year in his career, even in college. Now they don't have that because he's fractured his wrist and he's out for 6 to 8 at least. So this is now causing ripple effects here in Philly, because now they went from we're definitely going to the Super Bowl to uh-oh.
Yeah, and Russ, I could count the seconds until I saw the tweets that said, well, Colin Kaepernick's available.
Yeah, but they won't do it because they don't have the guts. They brought in Michael Vick, which was a ridiculously bad move, and it worked out okay for them. But from a public relations standpoint, I would bring in Kaepernick any day over Vick, and they did it the opposite. But they won't do it, and nobody's going to write about it, and we know why, and there's no point.
And just one other thing, and then we'll get started. Peter in our group chat brought up the name of Bo Bichette, who's one of the Blue Jays' top prospects, who's come up from AAA Buffalo, where I saw him play a few times, and I think he's had a hit in every game. I think he's had a double in every game, which is a major league record. Right. The ironic thing, and he did it against the Yankees yesterday. The ironic thing is, Russ, he was not supposed to be the best Bichette.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't know that.
The Yankees drafted Dante Bichette Jr.
That's right.
In 2011. He was supposed to be a great prospect. I looked it up yesterday. after 7 years in the Yankee chain, never getting as higher than Double-A, they essentially let him go, and now he's playing Double-A with the Washington Nationals. Never. Now imagine, he was the guy. He was the one who was supposed to be the one, and his younger brother is right now taking a first step towards being a star.
The one thing I'll say about Bo is, and I think Dante Bichette Jr., was built more like his dad, more like a power hitter. Yeah. Bo's not built really like a power hitter. So what you're seeing to me is a guy with really good bat speed and who's a gap hitter, which I think is probably better for him not to be talked about like his dad, who was this really, he had a huge upper body. And clearly we know he may have been one of those guys, a steroid guy. But even if he wasn't, he had a huge upper body. I don't think Bo Bichette will ever be built like that, but I think what you see is a different kind of player, and that's good.
The one thing that Bo Bichette's got to change is he's got that Krusty the Clown hairdo like Jacob deGrom used to. And for a shortstop, I don't know if that flies. Pitchers can get away with that stuff, not shortstops. Anyway,
guys, I told you guys I was a huge Dante Bichette fan. I mean, everybody loved
you saying that
for a while in Colorado. So anybody who's in a fantasy league, your first priority was go get Bichette, go get Helton, go get Vinny Castilla, and then make your roster around there.
Go get Larry Walker, who hit 350. Okay, let's start the show. Jan, you go first. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, August 9th, 2019.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Peter Tessier in balmy Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. We'll start off with this because, it was brought up in our little group chat in terms of things we want to talk about. Jake Gardiner. Jake Gardiner still is not signed. There has been a rumor, and I know it was out there last week, and we're just going to discuss it a little bit here, where there supposedly is a handshake deal between Gardiner and a team. Now, Peter, I don't know. I didn't hear the Eastern Conference part of it. I just heard a team. But let's go with it in terms of Eastern Conference and say that's the case.
Someone I know here who has some connections into the Jets and has been a fairly reliable person to chat with some things, has been accurate on a number of things, has said there was thinking that if the Jets are going to take it, that if the Jets certainly were known to express interest in Shattenkirk, well, why wouldn't they at least kick the tires on Gardiner? They've lost two key right-hand Ds, so why not look at Gardiner? It's believed they did.
He's a left-hand D, though.
Left-hand D, sorry. I don't know why I thought he was right-handed.
Right.
Anyway, kick the tires. And this person mentioned to me that the rumor going around is that he has a handshake deal with a team in the East that once they clear out some money, they will announce the signing. Whatever that means. And that's actually popped up in my Twitter timeline twice. And from other unconnected people. So there's some smoke here that's starting to come out. I don't know if it's coming out everywhere, but as you said, Mike, beforehand, Montreal, Buffalo, and that makes sense. I don't know who else it would be, but does Montreal need to move cap space out?
Well, they don't. They don't in terms of being under the cap, because they're right now a little over $4 million under the cap. But if you look at their defense and you look at who was buried in the minors for most of the year last year, which was Carl Alsner, making $4.625 million for another 2 years after this year, you could see that they would probably want to walk away from that or move that out to a team, like Ottawa or Arizona or one of these teams that need to get to the cap floor, maybe pay them a draft pick, pay them some sort of to clear the space. And, they know that Gardiner is well aware of the landscape in the Atlantic Division and probably would be a good addition to their blue line. So I think that makes a little bit of sense, but I don't see anybody taking Alsner off of their hands unless they're giving up a first or a second round pick, Russ.
No, it's hard to move guys right now. If the Rangers were able to move like Nemestikov, they probably wouldn't have done what they did with Shattenkirk. Teams can't move players right now. So this, to me, it must be an RFA more than players need to be moved to get Gardiner signed, because maybe there's a team that is semi-close to the cap that feels like their RFA could take them closer to the cap than they can afford Gardiner at that point. So maybe that's what it is, that they're waiting for that to come down.
Well,
and they'll look.
Peter, one question. Did you hear anything in terms of dollars they're talking about for Gardiner?
No, have not heard a lick on
So
money.
That's kind of a huge key, right? Because even if a team frees up somebody, they still need to be in position to potentially give him the kind of dollars he might have wanted. And the question is also has his asking price come down given how far into the summer we are and there's really been no traction in terms of signing him?
Well, based on the fact that he made a little over 4 with Toronto last year, I would assume in free agency he's looking for more than that. So I'd say 5. I think that's reasonable.
I think he's looking for 5. So, but like I said, I haven't had a chance to look at Cap Friendly, but I'm sure there's a team out there that has the cap space to get him now, but are worried about that 1 or 2 RFAs that they may have that are not signed yet that could, put him in jeopardy. Because
teams like New Jersey, somebody brought it up in the chat, they have the room already, but they probably are on a budget and they don't want to.
Right.
Yes and no, right? Because they haven't. How much? The question is, how much do you think Zaka is going to get? Right. So they're at $8 million now. How much do you figure Zaka is going to get? And then, given that they signed Gusev and took $4.5 million off their available cap,
I think that's low down on their priorities, Jan. I think it's signing Taylor Hall.
Right, but that's next year, right? That doesn't impact this year.
Right, but we're talking about a contract that's not going to be a 1-year deal for Gardiner.
No, I agree, right? And they're going to have more room next year, right? Because Simmons $5 million comes off the cap right away, right? So that's money you're likely going to have to play with next year. You don't have to worry about. The thing is, Heischer next year comes off his ELC. You're going to have to sign him, although it's probably going to be a bridge deal.
Right.
Green's $5 million comes off the books because he's a UFA.
Right.
Batman's $4.875 million comes off the books. They may re-sign him. So they will have plenty of money moving forward. It's a matter of how much cash they're going to have this year once they sign Zaka and how long they're going to sign him for.
Right. So that team is a perfect example of maybe why they're waiting. But I don't think Gardiner gets more than 2 years at this point. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm wondering. 2 years, $11 million, Russ, you think?
Something like that. Mike, I know you made a face, but I don't think anybody's going in for 3. I don't think.
I think. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe this is a repeat of the Cody Franzen thing from a few years ago, where he waited deep into the season and he only got a 2-year deal. But if the only way
he's a superstar compared to Cody Franzen.
Right. Well, I agree, but what I'm saying is, if it's only 2 years, he's gonna have to get that $5 million. I mean, there has to be a payoff in one respect. Now, another team that I mentioned and other people were mentioning in the chat was Buffalo, and with Buffalo, it would have to be them seeking out a Ristolainen deal. But if it's that means they're not taking back a player. And no, they want a top 6, either winger or center for Ristolainen. And in this instance, if you're talking about moving out Ristolainen's salary, which is $5.4 million, you're talking about probably getting a center or a right winger on their ELC or under control. That's going to be tough for Ristolainen because of all the negatives that have been there over the last couple of years to get back a young player and then to sign Gardiner. I think that's too much to ask for in terms of moving out Ristolainen, keeping the cap number coming back low, and then signing Gardiner. So I'm skeptical about Buffalo as a destination.
I can't understand why. I mean, right now, I think what Peter's saying makes a lot of sense, because otherwise I think we would hear a lot more about Jake Gardiner, because even with a suspected, possible back issue, we saw guys getting signed with back issues, like Gonchar, I think, had one.
Sure.
Sandis Ojulich, I think, had one. If you're an offensive defenseman, you still end up getting signed, and he's not. So there has to be some other reason.
Yeah, I agree. And the only now, there had been rumors throughout this summer about Gardiner would like to come back to Toronto, and Toronto would like to have him back. And they sort of fit the scenario that you were talking, Russ, where it's an RFA. If it's Marner, they don't know how much it's going to cost, and that uncertainty because of that, then that's the holdup. Gardiner's not going to wait forever. If it is Toronto, I don't think it is. I think they've moved on. There's a lot of talk coming out of the Leaf camp about the prospects of Sandin or Liljegren making the team out of training camp. I think they Dermott's going to be back in November. So I sort of think they've moved on, and they're realistic that they can't re-sign Gardiner and get Marner under a contract. So I don't think it's Toronto, but I really think it's Buffalo or Montreal, with an outside chance of a team like Detroit, who has got Eriksson, Daly, Green, all pending UFAs at the end of this year. They have the room to add a Gardiner, but I think they'd want to move a salary out if they were going to bring in a younger defense.
I don't think
why is Gardner going there other than to get money?
Well,
that's a team that's not going anywhere for several years.
Well, now it's funny. You're taking the tact of he's going there for money. I'm taking the tact of I don't think Eiserman would want him.
He might not fit into what he's looking to build around there, right? He's probably not.
Right. And the consistent rumor about Minnesota being interested in Gardner, they have to have a general manager to actually sign him.
I'll throw a name at you. What about, and again, I'm just looking now, what about Boston, right? You got Kruger's going to make an enormous amount of money next year. They want to sign him, right? You got Carlo also, who's got to make a lot of money this year. Do they look to maybe move somebody to free up space, figuring they can have Gardner for a couple of years?
That's a horrible idea. I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
No, I was going to say in the same idea, Jan, I think the one team that would have to move money out, I don't know how they can do it, but he seems to pull horseshoes out every year, is the Penguins and Rutherford.
Right.
They could definitely use them.
They're the team that
but I don't know how he can do it.
Right.
Given what they have. But
Justin Schultz, maybe?
Yeah,
no,
fine.
He's still too valuable.
Here's a hint.
You're swapping, right?
Well,
you probably want to keep Schultz.
Or it's $3.5 million a year they gave him for the next 6 years.
There's three potential guys that, Schultz, because he is a pending UFA at the end of next year. Eric Branson making $4 million, but who in their right mind is taking Jack Johnson at $3 million?
No one is.
Well, obviously he did there.
Right.
He's not in his right mind, but the same thing with Tanev. Why was he getting $3.5 million a year for 6 years?
Yeah, I could answer the Jack Johnson, and that's because he's buddies with Crosby, so they did him a favor and they brought him over.
That's a pricey favor, Russ.
Well, but that's what they did. I mean, that's what they went with. They went with the fact that he and Sid are buddies, and he'll play well with him on the team, and he didn't. And so Jack Johnson's Jack Johnson. Honestly, Schultz is better than Gardner all around. I would rather have Schultz.
And they were defense pairings at Wisconsin, so they were partners in Wisconsin. All right, Jan, there was a little bit of news regarding Chris Kreider and his situation with the Rangers. John Davidson, Rangers' new president, said, "I totally expect him to be at camp. He's got 1 year left in his contract, and that should be a whole lot of importance to him to come in and have a great camp and a great year, and we'll just see where it goes." Basically, I mean, they're not saying that they're not going to trade him during the season if the Rangers are not in the playoff mix. But, I mean, where do you think this situation is?
I've talked a lot about it, and I think Russ and I have talked a couple times on here. Look, my view is I personally think Kreider could be the future captain of the Rangers if they really wanted him to. The problem is that the term and the dollars are going to be a big driver here, like anybody else, but especially because they just signed Panarin, they just signed Trouba, they just had to buy out Shattenkirk. So that took up a lot of money in terms of because you look at it's $11.6 million for Panarin, it's about $8 million, it's $8 million for Trouba. And now next year, there's a $6 million dead cap hit for Shattenkirk after buying him out. That's about a third almost of the overall cap, depending on if it rises at all. The problem with Kreider is he's never hit 30 goals. He had 28 again last year. He got off to a great start before he slumped when he got hurt. But he is a guy that's a mentor to some of the younger guys, especially because he speaks Russian. You got Bugnevich there. You're bringing in Kravtsov, who he can mentor. You have Kakko, who's coming in, who you can mentor. To me, he's the kind of power forward you want to have on your team. The problem is if he's going to want 6 or 7 years at $6 to $7 million per season, which quite possibly is what he's going to want and what he might have got in the open market, that's going to be too pricey for the Rangers to match. Gordon and Sather before him has shown they're not going to let guys go to free agency. So we could approach late February next year with no deal being in place, with no traction associated with the talks. They may decide, you know what, regardless of where we are in the standings, we're going to move him. And especially if the team hasn't gelled, like a lot of us think they might gel, or if they're struggling, that's going to be more of a likelihood they're going to move him at the deadline, just like they did Zuccarello and everybody else with the rebuild. Try to get a number one or try to get a couple of prospects in here and continue the rebuild and use that money to sign somebody else in free agency.
See, this is where I differ. Gordon has a tie to Kreider. Like, he scouted him when he was with the Bruins, when Kreider was playing for BC. He likes Chris Kreider. He believes in him. He will do everything he can, I think, to keep him on the team. I think he's probably going to tell Kreider to hang loose, and I think after the season, they will probably buy out Mark Stahl. or not buy him out, but bury him in the AHL, or trade him if somebody actually wants.
Bury him doesn't do anything, Russ. It's $1 million only.
Well, I mean, that helps.
He's got to know. He'd have to basically agree to go through waivers to get that to be done.
Well, he only has 1 year left, though, right?
No, he'll have right, but so will Brendan Smith.
Right.
If you're going to buy somebody out,
do the same thing.
You're going to buy out Smith probably more so than.
No, but they don't buy anybody out. But I would make them both a pairing in Hartford, and at least that's $2 million.
Well, but Brendan Smith, after we're talking about after this year,
right?
Brendan Smith, his cap hit is, I believe, 4.3.
It's $4.3 million. Stahl's about $5.75 million.
Right, and Stahl's contract is even. It's not less in terms of money going out, which is important when it comes to a buyout.
Yep.
Smith's contract was front loaded. His cap hit is 3.5 or around 3.5.
Right, but they don't have any more buyouts, right? They can only send him down to the minors.
Correct. I think you're right. Well, yeah, because Spooner,
Girardi and Shattenkirk.
We have Spooner also. Don't forget, because part of that cap hit, again, they didn't buy him out, but part of that cap hit is on their books next year also because of Edmonton.
Right.
Yeah, but here's the way they can keep Kreider. Nemestikov's off the books.
Right.
You send down Stahl. You save what you can on that. You send down Smith. You save what you can on that. There's your money for Kreider.
Well, based on what's happened this summer, it's not impossible that they end up trading Brendan Smith and having somebody else buy him out. That's what the Leafs did with Marvel.
That could happen. They could make an enticing trade to do that. But I think that's what they're going to do, Jan. Something like that to keep him. I think
the only thing you have to factor in, Russ, is a couple of things. One, do you sign Brendan Lemieux and D'Angelo to more than 1 year deals, right? Because if not, then they're both going to be RFAs again next year.
Nope.
And you're probably going to have to pay them more depending on how each one of them play. B, what do you do with Jesper Fast? And do you try to look to bring him back based upon what he brings to the team? And he's only making $1.85 million. He's going to get a decent contract, but I don't think he's going to break the bank. And the other guy you'd have to figure out what you're going to do is Ryan Strome. So we think that and Strome's going to be a restricted free agent. So if you figure both Nemesnikov and Strome, let's say, are both gone, and Kakko and Hedl and Kravtsov have all played key roles on that team, you've now freed up enough money in terms of re-signing Kreider, even if he does want $6 to $7 million a year next season.
But you know what they're also going to have to be concerned with, and I know this very well from what Toronto has gone through the last 3 years, is the bonus money on those contracts to Anderson, to Cheadle, to Kakko. The Schedule A and the Schedule B bonuses, if they hit those bonuses, that's going to be cap hits going the next year over. That could be millions of dollars, and they're going to have to factor that in as well, because you're going to have to create space for it.
I doubt Anderson will hit any bonuses. Cheadle might, but I think Jan's right. I do think those moves that he talked about are the things they're going to do. I think they will bring back Fast, because I do think they realize how important he is to the team. And Strome is going to have to replicate what he did last year, which is going to be really hard if he's going to be retained. So honestly, I think he's a placeholder. I know a lot of Ranger fans like him, but I think with all the young talent you've got, I think Ryan Strome's a placeholder.
Peter, let me ask you this, because I reported last week about some speculation about Line A being moved. And again, with all these RFAs, I think the odds are 95 against them being traded and maybe a 5% chance that something happens. But with Winnipeg, with both Connor and Line A, you maybe have to think a little bit outside the box, because it doubles Cheveldayoff's problem in terms of getting them both signed. He tied Line A to the Canadiens, and that's logical because they're a very heavy Finnish team with Kotkaniemi and Lehkonen and other players, and they definitely need scoring, which is something I've said they've needed for years. But he was saying like a guy like Max Domi would be somebody coming back. I think it's going to take a lot more than Max Domi to get Line A in a trade from Winnipeg.
Yeah, we won't be making jokes 3 years later about the trade was 1-for-1. Like it's going to be a lot more, because it just is. Domi is a great player, but he's not generational with this particular talent, and that's what Line A is. Now that talent may be really the only thing he has going for him as a hockey player, but you can do other things. You can work to improve other aspects of his game. And I think I think a Claude Julien as a coach could actually be a great thing for Laine in terms of building him out and such. And I think, the city of Montreal could be a great place for him. But the Jets aren't going to give him away. He's a second overall pick who has scored over 100 goals by the age of 21.
Right.
I mean, or the age of 20. I mean, that's 20 or 21, whatever it is. I mean, that's a ridiculous pace. Right. That costs a lot. And should there even, and frankly, I think there's a lot of reason to make this speculation something that makes it logical. I don't think it's likely, though.
Right.
I just don't think Bergevin wants to go and give up an asset he got with Domi and then try and flip him around for something else and add more to it. It just does Bergevin's wheelhouse. He'd rather give up things he doesn't have, like draft picks and an offer sheet, to get something, as opposed to something he does have, because he's been trying to get players for a while, and talented players, and he's had to work through some issues to get them. I just don't think he flips it around like that.
I actually think that the guy, and it wouldn't make any sense for Montreal to do this in terms of a trade, but the guy that Winnipeg would want, because he's young, because he's a center, because he's on his entry-level contract, in a deal for Laine, and I don't think they're equal players, because Laine is a big goal scorer and has been since he entered the league, and this kid is just sort of coming into his own, is Kotkaniemi, but they want Kotkaniemi. They want Laine. If there's any truth to this, they want Laine to put with Kotkaniemi, not to trade them 1-for-1.
So then would you trade Connor for Kotkaniemi?
I don't think the Habs would do that.
I don't think so either.
I don't think they would either.
Yeah,
I don't think they would either. But maybe you throw in something else. I mean, we're just having fun here. This is almost the middle of August, so why not? But that's the way these things work, right? Like, you think about it, you come at it from one logical angle, and then you flip it around. Maybe the Jets pay more to get Kotkaniemi because that plays in their wheelhouse better, and they have more assets to give up. The Jets arguably have a better forward prospect pool than the Habs do, sitting and waiting to come up. So you might be able to have some expendable assets go the other way. I just don't think the problem is that you need overperforming players on entry-level deals to make your team work. That's just the fact of the matter now in the NHL. So why the Habs would give that up, or why the Jets would give up Laine for peanuts, it doesn't make sense that way. So we can just rip this idea up and throw it into the waste bin with all the other ones we get, because there's no sound business logic to this from management of your salary allocation to players and stuff. It just doesn't work.
It would make more sense of with a team that had an immediate need for goal scoring and had a deep talent pool that they could trade 2 or 3 young guys for a guy like Laine. So say for example, and had they not won the cup, and even though they're a team in Winnipeg's division, a team like St. Louis with Thomas, with Kreider, with Kostin, with the 3, 4, 5 really good young forwards, a couple of those in a deal for Laine, where those guys are on their ELCs and Laine is going to be getting a big contract, that would make sense. Whereas I don't think it makes sense for Montreal, because most of their top talent in terms of prospects are with the Canadians right now. They have a few, like Romanoff and a few other, and Paling, who's probably going to be with them this year. But they're not a deep organization in terms of offensive talent, and that's why that they might be looking for somebody who could score goals like Laine. Russ, you had something about August 15th is the only significant day in August for NHL teams, because that is the day where college players can go free agent. And we remember a few years ago with Jimmy Vesey and obviously Will Butcher, there are some college guys out there that are either going back to college for their senior year, which immediately puts them in that pipeline to become free agents the following year, or that are becoming free agents now.
Yeah, so Chase Prisky is he was a top pairing defenseman for Quinnipiac for the last 4 years, and he hasn't signed with the Caps. And it doesn't seem like he's going to sign with the Caps, probably because of opportunity, because, like, where the hell would he play? So when you look at a guy like that who who has good speed, who's played power play, PK, all those things, who's been a really good performer, especially in postseason for Quinnipiac, he's going to expect a little bit of playing time. So he's going to be out there. Teams right now, there are teams that could use a Chase Prisky. I'll give you one that would make sense, and I believe they've had Quinnipiac players before, and that would be the Islanders. And I could see the Islanders looking at him as a bottom pairing defenseman. You bring him in, you give him the 2-year or the 1-year ELC, whatever you want to do, probably a 2-year, and you let him play. And that could be a really nice bonus for a team like the Islanders because it's not much against the cap either.
Yeah, and Lou has a history with college players, so that would make a lot of sense. And he would be on an ELC, and that would sort of counterbalance some of the money that a lot of people would perceive as being wasted on veteran guys like Johnny Boychuk who are making $6 million.
Right. Maybe you put him with Boychuk, and that's a good learning thing for him. On the flip side, David Cotton has decided he's going to go back to Boston College and be a captain for them, and so that's a guy who you don't hear Carolina talking about. And he's a big center. He's like a 6'2", 200-something pound center. Mm-hmm. That's a guy who I think they should have signed him already. And if they don't sign him, they are going to, I think, be in danger of losing him. And so that's one where, I don't know, I watched him play last year in the Beanpot consolation game. And there was a point in the game where he literally just took it over because his team wasn't doing well. He probably wasn't doing as well in the offensive zone as he had liked. And then all of a sudden he just turned it on. And boy, he had a couple of great periods. You would think Carolina would want a guy like that. But again, they're letting him go back for his senior year. To me, he probably looks at that lineup and says, I can't even be a top 6 guy for the next 5-6 years in that lineup. With the guys that they have, prospects, Netches, guys like that. Even if he doesn't play center, where the hell is he going to play? And then play center, he's not going to want to play 4th-line center, and they got Lucas Wallmark as the 3rd-line center, right? So, where's the room for him?
And that's the scenario. That's the scenario that I think Adam Fox looked at in Carolina when you're looking at you have Hamilton and Falk and Slavin and Pesci and Hayden Fleury. I mean, they Jake Bean. They're loaded. Van Riemsdyk. They're loaded on defense. And he's like, okay, how the hell am I going to get playing time? I'll be in Charlotte. I may as well wait until I can force a trade or sign someplace else. And I think that's the motivation with a lot of these college guys. They're ready. A lot of them are ready after a little bit of a time in the American Hockey League. They're ready to step in the NHL or sometimes not even go to the AHL. They're ready to step in right away. And they're looking for teams that have the opportunity for them to play.
Well, and I think the team – and just to give you an example, last year he had 23 goals in 39 games.
Right.
Pretty dominant. He did play for the Junior Bruins as a kid, and so playing at BC, playing in that rink a lot, that's like a young David Backes, man. I can't imagine the Bruins wouldn't put that full court press on him next year if he gets to August 15th. I imagine they would. Sure. And so that's the kind of thing where, the Rangers are able to lure some kids, so can the Bruins. And so that's an interesting one. The other one is there's a defenseman in the Devils system, Riley Walsh, who plays for Harvard, and he's decided to go back to Harvard. And I saw an article on NHL.com that said he's going to go back this year, but next year he's going to battle for a roster spot in New Jersey. And that's great to write that. And right now this is only Walsh's 3rd year, so you hope that is the plan for this kid. But I got to tell you, the Devils definitely need to carry through and sign him after this season, because if they don't, he's another guy. This year he had 12 goals and 31 points in 33 games. Right. Another guy who plays the power play, who's fast, he's smart. They've got to get him locked up. So that could be another reason why if you don't see the Devils making some long-term moves on some defensemen, it's because, like you said, with Green dropping off, Riley Walsh may get an opportunity. So that's, to me, that would be the logical way for it to go.
I mean, Peter, there is definitely a benefit for some teams drafting players that are going to U.S. colleges, but with players like Besser with the Canucks, where I think he went 1 year, or Roslovic, where he was one or 2 years. I think it was Miami of Ohio he was at.
Yeah.
They could, it's very easy for them to say, okay, I'm not going to sign. I'm going to finish out my 4 years and I'm going to go free agent. If they don't think that, they have an opportunity to go to those teams and thrive. So there is I know that players who are CHL players, if they don't get signed within 2 years, they go back. And sometimes it's better for these other players to have more time to develop, but they still have an out that is favorable to them.
This is one of the things I wonder that'll come up again in the CBA too, in that as we see this more, will this become an issue that teams want to find a way to gain a little more control on this, or will they open this up a little bit for control in other places? Because as you said, Mike, it's becoming a more frequent thing to see that kids will use this leverage point to do stuff. Blake Wheeler is the famous example. People forget that he didn't want to play for a few places. I think it was Arizona who drafted him, right? And I think it says a lot about teams and how players are going to look at it, and advice. Like, do you want to get trapped for the first 6 years of your career here in a rudderless ship? I mean, how many, do you think does Edmonton even take a risk on players like that anymore? Would they even want to? You've got to be, so far teams like the Jets have had some reasonably good success with that, but you've got to have a spot. You've got to work with them. It requires a ton of resources throughout their college career to work with these guys, keep them in the fold, keep them believing in what you're doing and that they have opportunity with you. It's not a sure shot now that they're just going to come on board because they get a chance to make some money.
Right. I've looked at this, Peter, and spoken to people.
Yeah.
People who cover college hockey, or people who have been scouting college hockey. They don't think it's going to change in the next CBA. It sounds logical for us to say it should, but they seem to be okay.
I don't even know if it should, Russ. I'm just curious if it becomes something in there, right? We always find weird things when we go through these lockouts and stuff, that once the deal's signed, we go, oh, no one really talked about that issue. Yeah. Really, right? It was the one we know we're going to be talking about, and sorry to take this in a different direction, is escrow, right? We talked about this the other day. We know escrow is going to be a major issue, but how you get around those things in a good negotiation is you find give and take in other areas too that help balance things out.
Right.
And we always find little sort of, the Easter eggs in these deals. Oh, didn't know they were really talking about this, because, the talking heads on TV who are getting all the leaks never really bothered to pay attention to the nuances.
Well, the funny thing is that the league, in terms of the rights for players, there's a total different level of there is no consistency, because, like I said, with players who are playing in the WHL, the OHL, the Q, it's 2 years. You draft them. If you don't sign them by after 2 years, they go back in the draft. With players in Sweden or Finland, I believe it's 3, because they have transfer agreements with those players.
Yeah, the transfer agreements work.
With Russian players, or with players that go to the KHL, and I found this out doing a little research on one of the Leaf prospects. He played 2 years in the Ontario Hockey League. He went to play in the KHL, and because he went to go play in the KHL before he turned 20, their rights for him are indefinite, because there's no transfer agreement between the KHL and the NHL. So Emily Rassinen, this big 6'7" defenseman, who's probably not that big of a prospect for the Leafs anymore. He was a second-round pick who hasn't really panned out, but they hold his rights in perpetuity because there's no transfer agreement. So with colleges, it's 4 years, or if they decide they're going to leave school, and then they have that ability to go free agent. So, I mean, I'm
going to give you one more guy, and what makes this whole process sort of fascinating too is when all of a sudden you have an expansion draft involved coming up in a few years, the teams really want to sign these guys, because then all of a sudden it's another player you have to worry about. But the Vancouver Canucks with Tyler Madden was a star last year. He was a star internationally. He was a star at Northeastern. I got to see him play too in the Bean Pod. He was amazing.
And this is the former Devil's son.
Yeah. John Madden's son. he's going to want to come out next year and sign with Vancouver. I'm sure of it. Now, it's only going to be his second year, but if he has another year like that, I don't think Vancouver's going to have a choice. I think they're going to have to sign.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about the Islanders thing. I know that we'll talk about it at another.
Yeah, there's more things to come with that. That was a guaranteed thing that happened yesterday.
Yeah, the other thing we want to touch on before we take some questions here, Russ, is you saw some NHL players practicing in Sweden with Frölunda, and that sort of raised your eyebrow a little bit.
It did, and I can't remember who the second one was, but Oliver Wahlstrom was the other one. And so I did a little digging, and apparently his dad played over there. His dad is Joachim Wahlstrom. Nobody will know him. His best year was 12 goals. His last year was 2 goals. But he played over there. And so he knows the owner of the team. His dad knows the owner of the team. So what good – I mean, this is really good for Oliver Wahlstrom to sort of keep it going during the summer so he could, put his best effort in to try and make the Islanders, even though I think he'll start the year in Bridgeport. He looked good in the summer showcase. And what Islander fans should take out of that is he does look in better shape. He was probably a little out of shape last year in college. His defense wasn't good in college last year. But right now you saw signs of Wahlstrom in that World Junior Summer Showcase that you always knew he had with the shot and everything else. So with him getting tutored by Frölunda now, I got to give him at least a little bit of a chance to make the Islanders, but he probably still won't. But still, this is a smart move for him, and I'm surprised more players don't do this with their connections, even though teams may frown on it. I would have to think most would be okay with it. They don't have control over these guys over the summer anyhow.
Right. Okay, we'll take some questions here. Esmir asks, what do you think the Islanders should do with Josh Hosang? Does he have a future with them? Jan, I personally, I think Hosang doesn't fit with Trotz, and his sort of personality doesn't fit with Lamoriello type teams. So I think he's got an uphill battle to even make that team. What do you think?
I think he's got a material battle to make that team. He has shown when he came up the ability to score, but clearly, I guess I don't know if I'd call it the off-ice antics or more the on-ice antics, or the perception of who he is, in terms of that all started clearly with the number he wears, and it's just trickled down from there. Clearly doesn't seem to play well based upon the structure of the organization. So you look at Trotz and you look at Lamoriello and the type of people they are, and then you look at somebody like Hosang, and it clearly is an oil and water kind of a mix there.
Yeah, I don't think Hosang fit with Trotz at all, and I think Lou was tolerating them. And that's not to say anything bad about the kid. I don't think he's done anything wrong last year. Right. I just think they don't have any time for him anymore, and I think they should trade him because I do think he's a tradable commodity. But they haven't, right? So my guess is he's going to start the year off in the AHL, and then maybe they'll work some sort of deal at the deadline if he has a good year. Part of me feels bad for him because he's got enough skating ability. He definitely can get to the neutral zone quickly, gets into the offensive zone quickly. His zone entries are good. The problem with him is that, like I saw 2 years ago in an AHL game, he could still become a little unhinged during the game with his temper. I don't know how that'll be this year. I hope he's got it under control.
Yeah. He doesn't want to conform. I think that's what that's what scares a lot of teams off. Funky Cold Zadina asks, what is the Jets' contingency plan if Laine and Connor hold out?
Well,
somebody stop Peter
Vesalainen and praying. Like Vesalainen and praying. I mean, they could, Mason Appleton, they're just going to bring from within. They're not going to spend any money on finding someone. They're not going to trade for someone. There is no contingency plan for that, right? Like it doesn't exist.
Peter, quick question.
You can't.
What do you think happens with Vesalainen this year? Obviously, last year there was a lot of, he went back overseas. Yeah. There's a whole lot of back and forth associated with him. Do you think he's got a consistent role in the team this year or not?
I think he has to, because they need someone on entry-level deal. The simple economics means he has to play, but he went and played well. He did come back and played for the Moose at the end of the season and actually played well. Did okay in the playoffs with them. I foresee him having okay, let me qualify this. I foresee him playing meaningful minutes as long as Paul Maurice has decided that he will not play favorites with his minutes anymore. This is a big if, and it's going to shape the way the entire Jets team is operated, because if Maurice is going to structurally allocate minutes based on who he thinks does what, rather than building the best lines for the team and rolling them effectively like the Jets could do 2 seasons ago, then Vesalainen is going to have a chance to play with quality players in good positions. If Maurice is going to structure his deployment, and I have a belief that he's going to, because of the face-off rules. And when we were at the draft, I actually talked to him about those rules right after the coaches meeting. Mike and Russ and I were all up there. And he seemed very curious about how he's going to look at deployment for that. And that could play into Vesalainen's favor. I think he's going to give every opportunity, but Maurice has to adjust his approach, because he should be given an opportunity now.
I'll tell you, if it were me, I would have Vesalainen on that top line with Scheifele, because just like Tom Wilson, and he's not the same player. He's way more skilled than Tom Wilson or Cassian, but that same sort of effect with a physical presence who could skate and has offensive ability. You put him on a top line with guys that you know will help him become a better player quicker, but also can get you the puck. I would put him right there, and I think it improves them immensely, but I don't think Maurice would trust them. That's the problem.
And also, if he had success, if they put him on the line with Scheifele and Wheeler, and he had success, what do you think Laine and Connor are thinking?
Yeah, but you can't worry about that, Mike.
Connor's had all the benefit.
He has.
He's played with Wheeler and Scheifele almost exclusively. He's had power play time.
Right.
Laine's had boatloads of power play time. What he hasn't been given is, other than playing with Stasny for a little bit, he hasn't been given a true center. He doesn't work with Brian Little. It doesn't work. So Blake Wheeler, when Scheifele went down in 2017-18, Blake Wheeler played center, and he actually did a darn good job at it.
Yeah.
What Maurice has to do is he has to move Scheifele away from Wheeler, because they can both drive play, at least at the other end. Scheifele still has some defensive deficiencies, but he moves the puck and he does things well when it's in the offensive end of the ice. So you take a Laine and you put him on the right wing of Scheifele, and you can throw Ehlers up there. And Wheeler and Little can play together. We just haven't seen it enough, but they still can. So put Connor with Little and Wheeler, or put, there's options here.
I think that makes sense. I would have Vesalainen on the top line, because you would own the corners then. And that would, if you put Ehlers there, you're really looking at a skill line, but Ehlers has no pushback to him. He has no.
Of course, I think the balance that the third line of Perreault, Lowry, and Roslovic is nothing special. I'd probably want to move Vesalainen up and one of the guys like Ehlers down, at least to kind of balance out the roster a little bit.
I would do the same.
You know what I do, Jan? I think you're right on the money there. I think if you were going to say Vesalainen, we need to capitalize on you now and get you feeling the game and get you into those positions to succeed. You put him on the top line, like Russ said, and you drop Ehlers down and you put him with Kopp and Lowry. So you've taken the speed demon of Tanev off that line. Well, Ehlers has almost the same speed, but about an oil can of more talent.
Right.
So what can that do with two guys like that who can get the puck out and battle in front, like Kopp and Lowry? Like, let Ehlers be your finished guy.
Yep.
Okay, Flamester, our buddy Flamester asks, Mike, who do the Flames move to fit Tkachuk, meaning Matthew Tkachuk, who's an RFA right now? Well, if you look at Cap Friendly right now and Cap Central, the Canucks are – sorry, not the Canucks, the Flames. The Flames are $7.7 million under the cap.
There you go.
That's after they bought out Stone. So
Right.
I don't think they have to move anybody. I mean, I don't think that they think, unless Tkachuk signs a 7 or 8 year deal, and it'll probably be more than $7 million a year, that, they have to worry about. If it's a bridge deal, then it probably is less than that. If they have to move somebody out, I mean, Michael Frolik in the last year of his contract making 4.3, something like that. Maybe.
Honestly, let's be honest about this. I don't think you can give Tkachuk more than 7.5. I don't care how many goals he scored the last 2 years. He's a really good player. He's not a superstar. I'm not getting into the $8-9 million range with this guy. I've got 7.5 free. I'll give you that for 5-6 years, and then you can have another crack at it. If you keep scoring 30 goals, then yeah, you'll get paid in that genre. But I would
basically you're gonna end up paying him more regardless than both Gaudreau and Monahan.
Maybe not. Let's see if that's true. Let's see if he continues to score like that. That's what I'm banking. That's what I'm betting against. I'm not giving him more than 7.5, though. No way.
Could they end up bridging him for 2 years?
I mean, that could end up being what happens. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the issue there is,
I wouldn't want to do that, but that may happen.
But the issue there is right now is the fact that everybody is waiting supposedly for Mitch Marner, and they want to use Marner as a comparable. And if they use Marner as a comparable and Marner gets, $9 million on a 3-year bridge, then it might cost $7 million for Tkachuk to get a bridge
but
deal.
Marner's going to go last. That's what all these other guys don't understand. He's going to go last of the forwards. Provorov is going to go last of the defensemen. That's the way they've sort of set up this game now.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting point, right? Because if Marner is your comparable, are you banking on the fact that your client then compares to Marner or compares to the situation Marner's in?
The situation.
I think
when you're in Marner's situation.
I think both. I think you're going to base it a little bit of your Tkachuk, right? You're not getting Marner money, right? But you can figure yourself, let's say you think yourself as 3/4 of Mitch Marner, for example. If he's making $11 million, you may say, I want 7 or 8. Not that that's accurate or correct, but that may be the basis of comparison that he and his agent are going to use. Be it right or be it wrong. I'm just saying.
See, the problem is that you look at Tkachuk. Tkachuk is a better goal scorer than Marner. Right. Tkachuk is a power forward with that nasty edge and that ability to piss people off. Marner,
he's his dad.
Right. Marner is a unbelievable passer. They're not comparable, but they're different players.
Well, I'll tell you what the difference is. Marner's the rare playmaking winger where Tkachuk is not that guy, right? Tkachuk is a goal scorer and a bull in a china shop and a really good player, but Marner will always get more points and drive more points. He'll get more points to his line mates.
Exactly. They were a perfect complement for each other when they played with London, because one would go in the corners and beat the crap out of everybody and get the puck to Marner, and Marner would set up the goal. Right. And usually he would set it up to Tkachuk. Right. So, yeah, I mean, but the problem is like, who is going to break first? Will it be Point or will it be Rantanen? Because eventually somebody's going to have to go first. And I think Russ is right. I don't think it's going to be Marner. I think Marner is going to wait until the beginning of training camp or maybe even to the beginning of the season to sort of maximize what he's going to get. I don't think the Leafs are going to capitulate like they did with Nylander. So I think it's going to go to the 11th hour. But some of these players, unless they want to hold out through training camp and hold out to the season, they're going to have to make a decision free of what Marner got to get into camp. So anyway, okay, good show, guys. We will be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Jan Levine, for Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello.
Russ the legend Cohen. Can you get it right, Mike?
Yeah.
Right, legend Cohen. One more thing before we go. 31st anniversary of the trade that rocked the nation.
Yes. And also this 24 years ago today, Jerry Garcia died.
Oh, boy. And the 74th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb on Nagasaki.
Oh, what a great way to end the show. Good job, guys.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the Debbie Downer, Mike.
Yes.
Yeah, way to go, Mike.
Sorry about that. I'm a history major. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.